Welcome or welcome back to the Build stage here at Black Tech Fest 2024. If this is your first time seeing my face, I am your host of this stage. My name is Deborah Chosen, and we have had a really good day so far. Have you had a good day so far? Yeah, I can't hear you. Have you had a good day so far? All right, that's what I'm talking about. So if you've come just now, then you would have missed my little spiel earlier. I was sharing that, some of us have come here today with a dream or a goal, right? But I came with one dream and one dream only. And the dream was that one day, the Build stage will be the loudest stage at Black Tech Fest. Can we do that? You guys don't sound like you're really supporting this dream. You said, Deborah, you're aiming too high. Listen, the day is not done, and this is a new set of people, so I have faith in you guys that you're going to bring the noise, you're going to bring the energy, the love, and the support as we welcome, that's right, as we welcome our next panel. So I have the pleasure of introducing them. So this session is going to be called It's Not Just What You Say, but How You Say It. We are talking about reputation building as a founder. So, what we're going to discuss is that in today's competitive landscape, reputation is everything. So this dynamic panel of founders will be sharing their insights on how they're actively managing their reputations, and both externally in market and internally within their teams. So again, if you are a founder here today or you're an aspiring founder, this is a great time to tap in and take notes. As I welcome to the stage our guest panel. Please give a round warm of applause for Director of Milltown Partners, Justin King. Joining Justin, please welcome CEO and founder of Grid, Amber Hill. And next to the stage, please put your hands together for tech journalist at Bloomberg, Mark Bergen. And last but certainly not least, please give a warm welcome to CEO and co-founder of Passion Fruit, Raffi Salama.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much for everybody for joining this session. Just by way of introduction, my name is Justin King. I am a director and the head of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Milltown Partners. If you don't know Milltown, we are a global strategic communications agency with offices in London, New York, San Francisco, and Brussels. And we do a lot of work in tech. So I'm very pleased to be joined by a number of panelists and friends, Dr. Amber Hill, Mark Bergen, and Raffi Salama. I'll turn it over to the three of you just to do a very quick introduction to yourselves. So Amber, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I am Amber. I'm the founder and CEO at ResearchGrid. We are an automation engine for admin-free clinical trials. What that means is that we automate the entire back office of clinical trials end-to-end using artificial intelligence and process automation.
Mark Bergen, I'm a reporter with Bloomberg. I cover venture capital startups, kind of tech across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I'm still a relative newbie to London. I moved here a year and a half ago after about a decade of covering tech in California.
I'm Raffi Salama. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Passion Fruit. Passion Fruit is a platform that connects the world's leading brands like Pepsi, Mars, HSBC, AB InBev with the best marketing freelancers in the world.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Well, we're here today to talk about reputation and communications. I think, and I would say this, of course, because I work for a PR agency, but today, more than ever before, how you communicate, how you talk about your reputation both to external and internal audiences and how you shape that reputation is incredibly important. And a lot of companies can be incredibly successful, particularly off the reputations of their founder, but also a failure to communicate can be perhaps a way that companies might hold themselves back. Now, I've got two founders on this panel and one journalist, which is really exciting, so we're going to get some varying perspectives on this question. First, I'm going to turn it over to you, Raffi, and you, Amber. I want you just to give your reflections on how your ability to communicate has impacted and influenced your business. Why don't we start with Raffi, and then we'll turn it over to Amber.
For sure. So my belief is that in any company, the talent density you're able to build within the business is the most important part of what you do, because everything flows downstream from the quality of people you have on your team. So when I think about communication, the first thing I think about is, am I building a business and a brand that the brightest and the best people, wherever they are in the world, are going to want to come and work with us? Because if I can't get that right, I'm never going to be able to win the top customers. I'm never going to be able to keep the top customers. I'm never going to be able to appeal to the top investors, et cetera, et cetera. So everything we do, in my view, comes downstream from how we set ourselves up as an employer brand to the brightest and the best. So when I think about how I communicate, the first thing I always try and work out is why would someone want to come and work at Passion Fruit, and what methods do I have to effectively distribute that message?
I would piggyback on that slightly, but with a sort of two sides of it. I think I'm a very good communicator internally, and I wasn't always a good communicator externally to journalists and things. And so I agree that being able to communicate to a team your vision, your mission, and get them excited about where you are now, but also where you're going, is fundamental for your every stage of development. But beyond that, I have a sort of narrative of never assume common sense, and I think that that sort of translates into every aspect of the business, both internal team and also when you are talking to external PR agencies or communicating your business to investors, and there's a different strategy or a different way that you would communicate to each of those individuals or groups along down the line. So it's had a huge impact kind of polishing that over time for the business, both internally and externally.
Great. Mark, I want to turn it over to you. As part of your role, you speak to a load of companies in the tech sector. You speak to a load of founders. And so I'm sure you've run into some really great communicators and perhaps some not so great communicators. First thing, though, I want to talk about is you and I are both from the United States. We know in the United States there are quite a lot of very high-profile tech founders. And what you don't get in the same way, at least in the UK and Europe, you don't have the similar number of high-profile tech founders. Some of that is probably because of the companies that have come out of the United States that are now global companies. But I wonder, in the year and a half that you've been here, how have you noticed the difference in approach that British companies versus American companies take to communications?
Yeah, this is a bit of a broad strokes, but like there's sort of like the U.S. cowboy mentality where it's like fake it till you make it and like oversell. And then there's, I mean, maybe it's just cultural, is the British and sometimes European of undersell. I think some of it is just, like you mentioned, the structural, like there's not a Spotify. It's basically the only big kind of consumer hit. There are a lot of really successful and really strong SaaS companies, like fintech companies. It's a little, those are harder stories to tell, and we are in the press just as like guilty of that in some ways. People want to read about consumer apps. They want to read about like well-known brands. There's like, even for business, we're mostly a business readership, but it's like a smaller group that want to read about SaaS, right? And so that's a harder hurdle. But there are also like a lot of very successful companies here that don't toot their own horn very well, which to me, I get that and I kind of respect that mentality, but it is a hindrance against the like Silicon Valley, like we're like, 10xing everything.
Just really quickly, so when we think about communications, there's a number of different approaches or tactics that you can use to communicate, whether it's through the media, whether it's social media, whether it's kind of engaging directly with the audiences that you care about. Just very quickly, Raffi, Amber, when you think about either your own profile or you think about your company, what does communications actually look like? We talk a little bit about the impact of communications, but just to give everybody here a flavor of what do you do day to day to reach these audiences, can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe let's start with you, Raffi.
Yes, I'm a big believer in the idea that less is more and more is more, but it's the middle that gets crushed. So what I'm always saying to the team is, we're either going to do something completely, utterly, and absolutely, like we are very big on LinkedIn and spend a lot of time there, dedicate a lot of resource there, or we're not going to do it at all. So I think we might have the Instagram handle that's relevant for Passion Fruit, but we're not using it because my view is, we're a Series A startup, a team of 25, 30 people. That's still a relatively lean team, and we're not going to be able to do Instagram as well as someone else who's really focused on that. So our big bet is certainly on LinkedIn, and I think a lot of the video features they've been driving recently are really kind of in line with how we think about getting the message out there. we're definitely not as interested in what I would call like, traditional like TV media necessarily. I think for us, we really want to own our own message. And I think LinkedIn, I'm sure I'm speaking to a group of people who, when they get their phone out various times in the day, are checking LinkedIn, even they're just scrolling through. And I'm just such a big believer that that will be the platform that as our work lives and our personal lives blend more and more, it captures more of our attention.
Amber?
So for me, the comms side of things is entirely systematic. I am not a comms person. There's no one on our team who has a marketing background or any sort of communication background. So for us, coming from a science background, it was almost like an experiment, where every entire thing was systematic. We did trial and error. We would change, we would do little experiments where we would change one word in a outreach just to see what the response would be, and we tracked it with data. And so internally now we have built and engineered an entire sort of almost sales force of our own, where we've got our own leads. We can systematically craft a campaign out to the people that we need to go, and that has transformed our sales. I think the other thing that has transformed our marketing is working with Milltown Partners. So our marketing didn't used to look like it does now, which is a little bit more systematic. I think we still have a long way to go, but before it was in pieces. We had 2 products, we had 2 brand identities for those products. So streamlining everything into one space has transformed the company to the extent that we have 5 pharma companies come inbound in the last 2 months, which just never happened before. And I think when your marketing comes together and your narrative and it all comes together in a systematic way where you're very disciplined and focused about the message that you are putting out, then it can transform your business in multiple ways.
Thanks for the shout out. Mark, I'm sure you've encountered loads of founders who communicate very, very well. Is there anyone who particularly stands out to you as somebody who was exceptional?
Yeah, there's a couple, and this one just came to me now, but does anyone ever in the audience know Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box in the US? Now, can any of you just said yes, explain what the hell Box does? Yeah, but like, yeah, so okay, you can. So, but I mean, he's a really. I don't know if this is effective. I mean, it's certainly effective, and he's like very out there on social media. He is out there and opinionated on things that have nothing to do with enterprise software. About the startups, about politics. I'm sure he has someone that writes his clever tweets for him, or maybe he doesn't himself. But like, he's just a known entity, and like we get him on TV all the time, in part because it's like, oh, who's around to talk about XYZ issue? It's like, oh, Aaron will do it, right? And so I think I mean, he's a communicator not just in his area of expertise in his company, but like kind of broadly. And that is really effective at building out that brand. Someone here, it's another man, unfortunately, but the CEO of Synthesia, which is a really interesting video AI company. I'm going to butcher his last name, but Victor Reparabelli, I think. I found him to be really effective is he's willing to talk about the tough issues of, they're building video avatars, AI avatars, which is some kind of scary stuff that has all sorts of implications, right? But he kind of takes them head on, and every time I've seen him speak or talk with him privately, I come away a little bit more like convinced from his perspective, and a bit more like, oh, I can see it there, and I think that's actually really effective, especially if you're working in something like AI that has like just built-in controversy, to be able to like take those things head on usually works.
So I guess there's 2 important lessons there to learn from what you've just said, Mark. One, you can talk about other things, but then that gives you an opportunity to talk about the thing that you want to talk about, in the case of Box. And then transparency in communications is very important. I want to change gears slightly. I think as founders of color, as people of color, we often face quite unique issues. And when you're a founder, there are often moments when the communications opportunities that you will be given will be communications opportunities directly attached to your identity. So, for example, we're in Black History Month now. I can't tell you how many founders I've spoken to who the only panels they get to be on are Black History Month panels. And so, Amber, you and I were having a conversation the other day about controlling your narrative and being recognized and known not just for your identity, but on the merits of your expertise and the merits of what your company does. So can you talk a little bit about how you approach this issue and how do you make sure you retain that control?
Yeah, when we first started, I kid you not, the entirety of media for me was around either me being a woman or me being a black woman. And it was so upsetting to me because we were in the middle of a pandemic. We had a clinical trial software that could automate the back office of clinical trials. It was an unprecedented moment in history, and you wanted to talk about the fact that I look a bit different in the market. And so for me, it took a long time to kind of reconcile that. I cut off media almost entirely because of that. But over time, I've found ways to address it and to control the narrative. One of the things, if someone goes down that route and they think it's a really interesting journalistic perspective, which it's not, I will say, you know, being a woman or being a person of color is the least interesting thing about me, and then I will steer the narrative back to where it should be on the product or on our innovation, the fact that we can push the boundaries of AI in some of the most innovative ways and disruptive ways in the market. And so, and that's, you know, representative of how well we're doing in the market as well. So I think controlling that narrative and finding a few little lines that you can use to pivot the narrative back to where you want it to be in a respectful way is kind of paramount for controlling your own narrative. I think the other thing is if you are able or got a business that you can control the narrative in its entirety, so on social media, on other like sort of influential podcasts or anything like that that you have going on, that is a PowerPoint for you. So for me, it's you know, aligning those narratives in a clever way that's respectful to the product or to where you want them to go.
Raffi, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's a really, I think it's obviously so sad, really, that we're still, you know, I don't have too many words for it. I think anyone, at least the way I see it, just wants to be judged on the quality of their work and the quality of their ideas. You know, it's certainly what I wish for myself, and I now have an 8-week-old son, and what I would wish for him as well. So I think for me, it's just progress feels slow, and that's quite dispiriting, but I'm sure if we look back versus 50 or 100 years ago, we'd notice the progress. And I think for every generation, it probably gets a little easier, but I think there are still way too many examples of it being unnecessarily hard. And as, you know, we gain platform, I think it's important that we kind of shine a light where we can.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one reflection that we often have at Milltown working with different clients is that oftentimes as a business, you're trying to speak to multiple audiences at once using the same message. And while you want to have consistency in what you're saying, you also know that in order for that message to be resonant, you got to make that tweak here and there. So, I don't know, Raffi, I might start with you. As a founder, you know, how do you approach that process of, number one, understanding who your audiences are, but then number two, making sure that the message that you're delivering is going to be one that is going to ultimately get them out of bed in the morning and get them to either partner with you or become a customer or work with you?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think tactically, what I've realized more and more is that just to be quiet and let them really speak first, you end up realizing what they want to talk about. And I think as a founder, especially as a marketplace business like we are, we have two sides, both hugely important for the overall kind of thing to run, in the same way Airbnb must really value its hosts and its guests. I think for us, what we've realized is just to seed the floor a little bit and try and go, okay, I totally hit you. If someone asks me a question, okay, I totally hear you. Like, help me understand where that's coming from. Like, what's the issue? What are you trying to understand? Because most of the time, and especially with attention spans being so low, you can waste 90% of the moment you've got with someone talking about the thing you think they're interested in. Whereas oftentimes, if you just say, you know, tell me a little bit more, they'll kind of reveal exactly what they want to know. And then I see my job as a bit like a librarian with 1 million books in the library, and based on what they say, I'm then going to select that book and open and read a page. But if I'm just randomly selecting a book from the library, chances are I'm going to get it wrong.
Amber?
I think this is where you really have got to craft your messages very systematically. For me, if I am talking to a new hire, I might talk to them about the vision of the company and where it's going to go. So we are one of the first companies that are building our own AI end-to-end for clinical trials. If I'm talking to an investor, I might say this is the first time in history that clinical trials will be admin-free. Like, you should be a part of that journey. If I'm talking to a customer, I might say we can automate the back office of your entire clinical trial, saving you loads of money and time for your staff, and I'll put numbers to that, or for 32 million, or whoever, the scale of whoever I'm talking to. So I think you have got to find the ways in which you can communicate pretty much the same message. In each of those messages, I've said that we use AI to automate the back office of clinical trials. It's just the way that I shifted it to address or to the interests of the person that I'm talking to. So for staff, their interest is going to be impact or scaling in the company. For investors, it's, are you going to be a disruptive change in the market itself and potentially be a unicorn? For a customer, is what is the return on investment? And so you've got to craft your messages that are very disciplined and the same to those audiences.
Thank you. Mark, I'm going to ask you to make the pitch for journalists here. So I think the first time many people pick up the phone or decide to send an email to a journalist, it can feel like quite a scary experience. And so I want you to help me out here. I want you to do a little bit of a demystifying. For the people in the audience right now who might be thinking about speaking to journalists, they might think it's the right time to start engaging with the media. What are the things that you think are critical to know to make that engagement as productive and as useful as possible?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one is it's a long game. It should be a long game. I think, and I make this mistake a lot of like being very transactional in a lot of relationships, right? You meet someone, you want to get in, like on our side, we want to get information out of somebody as quickly as possible, right? Or like a founder meets you, they want to get written about as quickly as possible, right? Like I want you to write about my upcoming round, which is sometimes like very valuable. But like, you know, I think especially with the early stage, it's so much better to have a relationship with a journalist and someone in the media. So, you know, 6 months to a year, 2 years, when you have some big news or when there's a moment, they're like familiar with you and the company and how it works. Because a lot of journalists, you know, we are not sectoral experts at all, right? Some of them are way smarter than me, but most of us are like generalists that know a little bit about a lot of things. And so, and I'm sure you've had this, if you've ever been written about or know people who've been written about, like the frustration of getting facts wrong, or not just facts wrong, but like kind of painting the picture in not the most accurate way. Some of that is just because like we're on tight deadlines and pressure to turn things around, and we don't have the deep knowledge base. You spend 100% of your time in this world, all right? And so it's a long-winded way of saying, having a long-term relationship, talking to you not just about the funding round you're raising next week or writing about your startup, but like here's who I am, here's my area of expertise, that I'm not just a woman, I'm not just a woman of color, but I'm actually like an expert in this topic. And so we can think about, sorry?
A whole PhD.
Yeah, exactly. And so I can think about in my head, like when there's a story that comes around that I need a perspective on, like AI and clinical trials, I was like, oh, who should I call about that? Oh, right, Amber. And like, we're also not that well, you know, that is having that sort of Rolodex, because that often happens, not just writing about your company, but you want to write about a subject area. Yeah, so I'd say those are the two things. I think we are not as good at like demystifying the process of how that works, how like conversations work, what's off the record, what's on the record, right? Like, but then there's the gift of a place like Bloomberg too, is we have like radio and television, and like we are really interested in getting a lot of founders and startups wider coverage, even though we don't necessarily cover the like early stage sector as closely. Is that good? Is that a good defense? I mean, we're also kind of rotten people sometimes, so like.
I mean, you know, I said make the pitch. You know, you're not defending anything. We're all on the same team here. We're all on the same team here. Last question for Amber and Raffi. Both of you have made a lot of progress in terms of how you communicate to people. You know, Amber, we worked really closely together on that. But I just want to get your reflections. You know, if you are a founder, founders are notoriously time poor. Where do you get started? What's the first step that you take? Because as we've kind of said and as we've established during this conversation, communications can be a real boon to your business. So if you have any advice for people in the audience, where would you start?
I would start with what is your one-liner? What can you sort of pack into one line that is succinct enough and simple enough that someone can communicate what you said to someone else? That is almost all that matters. And then you'll find ways to tailor that into multiple different messages that sticks to that sort of focused area. That would be where I start. And then, things that you've got control over and that are free.
I definitely agree on the one-liner point. I think if I were to add something, it would be around the idea of leverage and the idea that you can build something and kind of sell it twice. So if you say something privately but don't document it and put it online, it will only ever be heard by the person you said it to. Whereas if you have a great idea and you put it on a Substack or a LinkedIn video and just press publish, that will always be able to be found and will be read by a customer, potential customer in 6 months' time, a year's time. I mean, we had an incident recently where we had a customer who felt like they were really close to closing, had gone a bit quiet, and then they liked one of the LinkedIn videos they put out, and 30 seconds later we had an email from them saying, okay, we're ready to sign this contract. And it reminded me that 95% of kind of all buying situations, whether that's getting a yes from an investor, a customer, a journalist willing to write about you, those decisions are being made when you're not in the room. So you need to produce things that can be consumed when you're not in the room. So I would really encourage any founder or any early stage team to write a lot, to put out a lot of video, and just, and something I really struggled with was like feeling like, oh, I'm a bit of a LinkedIn warrior now, but like you've got to be shameless because the next person is going to be shameless, and if you're not, then you're going to lose. So about a year ago, I kind of lost my shame, and it's really helped the business.
Amazing. Be shameless. That's a great note to end on. Well, thank you so much to all my panelists, Raffi, Mark, Amber, for joining us. Again, as hopefully we've established, I think communications is an incredibly important topic. It's something which, I think all three of these individuals on stage have been either involved in or very thoughtful about. And while I think we're only 1 minute left, I'm sure if anybody has any questions, if anybody has any reflections, please do come find us after this talk. More than happy to have that conversation. Thank you.